The rain slammed against the metal body of the train like thousands of tiny bullets fired from the darkness itself. The sound echoed through the empty station, mixing with the screech of steel wheels and the distant thunder rolling across the night sky. It was the kind of night that felt wrong. The kind of night where every shadow looked alive, and every stranger felt dangerous. Now imagine this. You are alone. It is almost 2 in the morning. The city behind you is asleep. The train you are about to board is nearly empty. And somewhere inside that train, someone is hunting women. Before we begin tonight's story, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because here on the Grim Tapes, we dive deep into the darkest mysteries, terrifying encounters, and disturbing stories that most people are too afraid to talk about. If you enjoy realistic horror stories, psychological suspense, and chilling late-night tales, then stay with us until the very end, because tonight's story becomes more disturbing with every passing minute. And trust me, the ending will leave you questioning how far fear can push an ordinary person. The station clock flickered weakly above platform 9. 1:45 in the morning. The rain outside had become violent now, smashing against the old tin roof of the station while cold winds swept trash and loose newspapers across the empty floor. Only a handful of passengers remained awake at this hour. Most sat silently on benches with tired eyes, while others slept with their heads hanging low. Emily Carter ran down the wet staircase toward the platform, breathing heavily as panic rose inside her chest. She was late. If she missed this train, she would have to wait almost 2 more hours for the next one. And tonight, waiting alone at this station felt even more terrifying than boarding the train itself. Her heels struck the wet concrete rapidly as she tightened her grip around her office bag. Her heart was racing, but not because she was late. It was because of the stories. For the past month, every woman in the city who traveled alone at night had been living in fear. 4 women were already dead. Every case looked the same. Late night train. Nearly empty coach. Screams nobody answered. Bodies found beside the tracks. The police had no suspects. No witnesses. No evidence. Only fear. Pure fear. Emily finally reached the platform just as the train slowly began moving. The yellow lights inside the coaches flickered weakly through rain-covered windows. The train looked old, exhausted, almost abandoned. For a brief moment, she stopped. A strange feeling crawled up her spine. Something inside her whispered not to board. But then the train started gaining speed. Without thinking further, Emily rushed forward and grabbed the cold metal handle beside the door. She pulled herself inside just before the train left the station completely. The moment her shoes touched the floor of the coach, silence swallowed her whole. The compartment was nearly empty. Only dim ceiling lights buzzed weakly overhead. Rainwater dripped near the corners of the windows. The old fan above rotated slowly with an irritating creaking sound. Emily looked around nervously. Empty seats. Dark windows. No conductor. No families. No conversations. Nothing. She slowly walked deeper into the compartment and sat near the middle section while holding her bag tightly against her chest. Her breathing slowly calmed. But the fear remained. Outside the train windows, darkness rushed past endlessly. Occasionally, lightning illuminated abandoned buildings, dead trees, and empty roads for only a second before everything disappeared again into blackness. Emily looked down at her trembling hands. She hated traveling alone at night. Especially after what she witnessed a month ago. The memories still haunted her every single night. She had been returning from work on another late train when she heard screaming from the next compartment. At first, nobody reacted. Passengers avoided eye contact. Some pretended to sleep. Others simply listened silently. Then she saw 2 masked men dragging a woman across the floor while the woman cried and begged for help. Nobody moved. Nobody stopped them. Nobody even shouted. Emily remembered freezing completely. Her body refused to move. Fear controlled everyone inside that train. And then, the men threw the woman out of the moving train. Emily still remembered the sound of her scream disappearing into the darkness. After that night, Emily never told the police what she saw. She was too terrified. And that guilt had been eating her alive ever since. A sudden burst of cold wind snapped her back to reality. One of the windows beside her had slid open slightly because of the shaking train. Rain sprayed across her arm and face. She quickly shut the window again. As she wiped the water from her skin, something on the floor caught her attention. A newspaper. Old. Wet. Crushed beneath the seat. Emily picked it up absent-mindedly. The front headline made her blood run cold. Another working woman thrown from moving train. Below the headline was a blurred photograph of the victim. Emily stared at the image. Then her eyes widened slowly. She recognized her. It was the woman from that night. The same woman she failed to save. Emily immediately dropped the newspaper onto the floor as if it had burned her hands. Her breathing became uneven again. She tried looking away. Tried focusing outside. But the image refused to leave her mind. Then she heard footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Approaching from the far end of the compartment. Emily's heartbeat instantly accelerated. An older man wearing a gray coat entered the coach carrying a small briefcase. He looked exhausted and barely glanced at her before sitting quietly near the opposite side. Emily relaxed slightly. At least she was not completely alone anymore. A few minutes later, another passenger entered. This time it was a young woman. Beautiful. Professional looking. Probably in her mid-20s. She wore a black office coat and held her phone weakly in one hand while rubbing exhaustion from her eyes. The woman briefly scanned the nearly empty compartment before choosing a seat near the train door. Emily noticed something about her immediately. She looked completely unaware of the danger around her. The young woman leaned her head against the window and slowly closed her eyes. The train continued cutting through the darkness at terrifying speed. Rain hammered the windows harder now. Lightning flashed across the sky. And somewhere in the distance, thunder growled like an animal. Then the compartment door opened again. Two men entered. Everything inside Emily froze instantly. Both men had cloth wrapped around the lower half of their faces. Only their eyes remained visible beneath dark hooded jackets soaked from rain. The moment Emily saw them, memories from that horrible night exploded inside her mind again. The screams. The blood. The helplessness. The body disappearing into darkness. The two men slowly looked around the compartment. Then their eyes stopped on the sleeping woman near the door. Emily's stomach tightened. No. Not again. Please, not again. The older man across the coach quietly lowered his gaze. Pretending not to notice. Pretending not to understand. Exactly like the passengers before. Fear had returned to the train once again. The masked men sat several rows away without speaking. But every few seconds, one of them kept staring toward the sleeping woman. Emily could feel her pulse pounding violently now. Should she warn the girl? Should she call the police? Should she move closer? But fear chained her body to the seat. Minutes passed painfully slowly. Then exhaustion finally caught up with Emily too. Her eyelids became heavy. The sound of rain and train tracks slowly blurred together. Before she realized it, she drifted into sleep. A scream shattered the darkness. Emily's eyes flew open instantly. The compartment had transformed into chaos. One of the masked men was dragging the young woman violently across the floor while she screamed desperately for help. No! Please stop! Somebody help me! The other passengers remained frozen. The older man looked terrified but still did nothing. The second masked man blocked the compartment exit while holding something metallic in his hand. The young woman clawed desperately against the seats as tears streamed down her face. Emily stood up halfway from her seat. But fear struck her body again. She could not move. The attackers dragged the woman toward the train door. Wind exploded inside the compartment as the door slid open. Rain poured inside violently. The woman grabbed the side railing and screamed for her life. Then one of the men grabbed her hair and forced her head outside toward the darkness racing beside the train tracks. "Please. Please don't do this," Emily finally screamed. "Stop." But her voice disappeared beneath the roar of the train. The masked man looked directly into Emily's eyes. Then he smiled and shoved the woman out of the moving train. Her scream vanished into the night. Emily woke up gasping violently. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Sweat covered her skin. It was only a dream. Only a nightmare. Or was it? Emily looked around frantically. The compartment was strangely quiet again. The sleeping woman near the door was gone. Emily's blood turned cold. She stood up slowly. The older man remained seated nearby, staring blankly at the floor. Then he whispered something quietly. "They killed her." Emily felt her knees weaken. "No." The old man looked up with trembling eyes. "They attacked her. 2 men. They dragged her away." Emily turned toward the far end of the compartment. Suddenly loud crashing sounds erupted nearby. 2 men were fighting violently beside the seats. One of the masked attackers slammed another man against the metal pole while punches echoed through the compartment. Emily ducked behind a seat in panic. The train shook violently during the fight. Then she saw something horrifying. A handgun. One of the masked men was holding a gun. The older passenger dropped to his knees immediately in fear. Emily's breathing stopped. But then, the young woman appeared again. Alive. Holding another weapon pointed directly at the attackers. Behind her stood 2 undercover police officers. "Drop it now," one officer shouted. The masked men froze. Everything suddenly became clear. The young woman was not a victim. She was part of a police operation. For weeks, undercover officers had been tracking criminals targeting women on late-night trains. Tonight was a trap. And the killers finally walked into it. One of the attackers tried running. The officers tackled him instantly. The second man raised his weapon, but the young undercover officer struck him hard across the arm before police forced him onto the floor and handcuffed him. The compartment filled with heavy breathing, rain, and silence. Emily stood frozen, unable to process what she had just witnessed. The undercover officer slowly walked toward her. "You're safe now," she said softly. Emily looked down at the wet newspaper still lying beneath the seat. The same dead woman stared back from the front page. Only now Emily realized something terrifying. The victim in the photograph looked almost exactly like the undercover officer. Almost identical. As if the dead woman herself had returned to lure the killers out of the shadows. The train continued moving through the storm while police dragged the attackers away. But Emily could not stop shaking. Because deep inside, she knew something horrible. If tonight had not been a police trap, that young woman really would have died. Just like the others. And once again, nobody on that train would have helped. The rain slowly weakened outside as dawn approached the horizon. But inside Emily's mind, the darkness remained. Because the scariest part of that night was not the killers. It was the silence of ordinary people. People who watched evil happen. And did nothing. And maybe that is what fear truly does. It does not turn people into monsters. It turns them into spectators. But now I want to ask you something. And think carefully before answering. If you were trapped inside that train, and you saw someone begging for help, would you risk your own life to save them? Or would fear keep you silent too? Be honest. Because most people believe they would be heroes. Until the darkness finally tests them. If you enjoyed tonight's story, make sure you subscribe to the Grim Tapes for more disturbing horror stories, psychological thrillers, and terrifying late-night mysteries inspired by real fears and real human darkness. Leave a comment below and tell us what you would have done in Emily's situation. Would you fight back? Would you stay silent? Or would you survive at any cost? Like the video if you want more realistic horror stories like this one. And remember, some monsters do not hide in abandoned houses. Sometimes, they sit quietly beside you on the last train home.